If you're a dungeon crawler enthusiast, if you're a fantasy RPG board game enthusiast like I am, the ultimate, the eternal question with your collection, is this game going to get a lot of play? Is this a title that's going to spend time on the table, get a lot of plays out of it, get a lot of enjoyment, or is it going to be a tale of regret and sit there on my gaming shelf kind of taunting me to play? I want to look at in this vlog, in this podcast, some of the mechanics with regard to Massive Darkness. Not so much from a rules perspective, because the rules and how the game plays are important, but there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of posts up there, but the duality, or I should say the triplicity of some things that Massive Darkness does really, really well. Just innovation, it works, wow. Some things that are solid, similar to the AI, similar to the rule structure of Zombicide Modern and Black Plague, that it's good. And then a couple of areas where it falls short. And the areas where it falls short, that's really, in my opinion, based on what you're looking for and the balance of the other two areas that make or break this game, depending on expectations, depending on what you're looking for, and ultimately literally answering that question, will this find its way onto my gaming shelf? So the first thing, it's not quite a Zombicide Modern or Black Plague clone, but it shares a lot of the mechanics under the hood. What I mean by that is we have modular dungeon tiles with some amazing artwork. They rotate, they turn depending on the configurations of where you set up the doors. That's going to affect the layout of the dungeon. I find this setup versus, say, something like Descent 2nd Edition, which I also love, or other exploration-type dungeon crawlers where you have little strips of corridors and big rooms and small rooms, and you're literally building the dungeon out of these little pieces. I find that takes a lot longer. The pieces are not as stable, and it takes up a lot of space. I like these tiles in that they just lay down, you connect them, you're ready to play. Small form, very quick setup, a lot of innovation on there, and you can really do a lot based on the configuration. What's new? So what's new is now one of the new mechanics, and this fits in really, really well, nicely for a dungeon game. And if you're coming from Zombicide, Black Plague, or Modern, this is a rule we need to keep into effect. Certain parts of the tile are literally dark zones, and others are illuminated zones. And when your character is hiding in a dark zone, the spawns, the minions, they can't see you. They can't find you. If you are a certain character class and you attack from the darkness, you get bonuses. There's certain interactions on there. This I find very intriguing, or I have found very intriguing, not only from a tactical point of view, but when things get crazy. When things get crazy with the miniatures, and there's especially with some of the boss monsters on there, they've got some real bite on there with the AI. You need everything that you possibly can. You need every little advantage. So these dark zones at the beginning of the game don't seem that important, but once you're midway through an adventure, yeah, you really need them where to hide. I find it a very, very interesting, effective, intriguing, unique dungeon mechanic when I can remember it. I mean, I love all of the kind of Zombicide titles, and I love Invader, so a lot of the rules are kind of just all over the place on there. Miniatures. Let's talk about the miniatures. This is a miniature-heavy game. We're just looking at the core right now. Of course, there's a lot of expansions out there to add, more heroes, more miniatures, but ultimately, one of the things that I like about this game is when you're setting it up, people come over and they're like, whoa, those are a lot of miniatures. And you're like, yeah, by like turn 4, we're going to be using all of these. I mean, literally, it's like walking into a dungeon and just kicking over that treasure chest, and the dungeon comes alive with minions and monsters and all sorts of crazy, crazy, crazy stuff on there. The challenge, though, and this is the kind of compare and contrast. Zombicide franchise spawns zombies at certain points on the map on there. So at the beginning of the game in Zombicide Modern, Zombicide Invader, Zombicide Black Plague, you're like, okay, it doesn't seem too bad. We've got some zombies on the table. And then the pressure ramps up and up and up. It's consistent. It's consistent in the Zombicide titles. With regard to Massive Darkness, the AI is completely different. You've still got a bucket load of miniatures, but things are broken down into 3 ways. The first is that when you open up a room, minions spawn, lieutenants spawn, they're kind of in charge of the minions on there. So I don't know what they're doing in that room. Who knows? You kick it open, you have to fight them. That is the equivalent to fighting hordes and hordes of just expendable meat shield wasteoid miniatures on there. That's going to be your XP farm. That's going to get you your treasure and stuff. Then there's a second level of spawn, and these are handled by cards. When you enter in a room or at certain rounds in the game, the second level are agents, and these are like a bump up from the rank and file. The agents are harder to beat down, harder to destroy, but they start roaming around calling in reinforcements. And this is where what we start to see, the feeling of a dungeon coming alive. So you kick open this door, you beat up whoever's in there, some agents running around, sounding the alarm, banging on the gong, hitting the drum, whatever it's going to be on there. Not only do they have increased stats and more powers, but you need to take them out immediately on there. And then there's a third piece, this idea of wandering monsters. So we have in Black Plague and Invader the idea of abominations. These are like super jacked up super zombies on there. They're very, very hard to beat. Some of them have some special rules. In Massive Darkness, this was taken one step further in that they're the boss monsters. They're very hard to beat. They each have some unique abilities in there. But on top of that, they roam the dungeon based on where they spawn. So they might be on the far side. They might be on the near side. They might be in the middle. Again, there's this whole ecosystem of a dungeon going on with the miniatures, and they're all kind of doing their own thing until you appear on there. Magic items. Before we get into character classes, and these are the things that I think the game does really, really well and really, really interesting. There are so many magic items in the game. There's a lot of loot everywhere. The game hands out loot like crazy. And when a agent or a boss is spawned, you also take a loot card and put it underneath their card, and it slots in, and it enhances their dice. Literally, they're using that magic sword. They're using that magic staff, and it's going to augment their powers. This is an interesting rules mechanic. It does 2 things. First, of course, you want to beat that miniature on there because you want to grab that loot. So it's a great loot mechanic. It's also a feeling of pressure because you can't let this thing run around. But it also increases the complexity of the game because you have the bosses with their set stats, which after a while you'll figure out how to beat. You know, you'll power game it, you'll figure it out. But based on the random spawn of items that they spawn with, that tweaks things, that changes things. It might introduce magic, it might introduce armor, it might introduce ranged stuff. It's an intriguing concept. Those are the things that I feel the game does really, really well with it. So now one of the rules points that it's okay, it's there, but things are starting to break down a little bit. And I feel like they were trying to innovate maybe a little bit too much and pack in a little bit too much into a fast play dungeon crawler. So let's talk about the heroes and how they operate. What's different now, of course, is you're going to have armor, you're going to have weapons, you're going to have abilities, you're going to have life, you're going to level up and get more powers. This is similar to not only other dungeon games, but also kind of Zombicide Black Plague, Zombicide Modern. The difference is when you level up, rather than unlocking one set skill, there's a skill tree. So you get to spend your experience points and grow the skill tree on there. So if you're playing the Shadow Barbarian, there's literally 5 different skill trees that you can decide tactically how you want to play. It grows, it unlocks. You could do one whole tree. You could do half of a tree. Of course, if you want the 3rd tier on the tree, on one of the paths, you've got to unlock the other 2. Kind of Diablo comes to mind with how that operates. It works well, but tracking it becomes a little bit of a hassle on there because the game plays very, very fast. You gain experience very fast. You spend it very fast. I feel like if that was part of a campaign, and there is a campaign mode to the game where you gained an ability per adventure, as opposed to you're going to unlock the whole tree in an adventure in there. It's a little bit more bookkeeping. It's a little bit more work to do. And I find as soon as you get that experience and you unlock, there's a pause in the game. Because now whoever's character that is like, wait, I'm going to unlock my skill tree. And they think about it, and they see what's going on the board, and they see the other players on there. It slows things down a little bit. It's a little too complex, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. It's a little bit too complex for a fast-playing dungeon crawler. The other challenge is the dice. And I understand with this game, because now this is going to lead into spawning, and this is going to lead into magic items. When you have a fixed dice system, you're using a D6, you're using a D8, D12. A lot of systems use D100 because you have 100 choices in there. But most fantasy board games are going to use D6 or D8. That limits the spread of what you can do. And we saw beginning innovation with Descent First Edition years ago. 2008, 2010, somewhere in there. This idea of these custom dice that are not only hit or miss, but have symbols on them. And the symbols allow you to unlock powers or use magic items. Massive Darkness follows that type of path on there, that type of configuration. So it's not just hit or miss when you roll the dice. There's this idea that how many powers did you unlock? They call them BAMs. How many BAMs did you get? So if I got 2 damage and 3 BAMs, I scored 2 damage. All right, I can take 2 BAMs, and now on this skill tree, play my Barbarian Shout. That's going to do another damage, and then I can play my 1 BAM left to utilize my Magic Axe of Fury, which lets me do this. There's a lot of thinking in the moment on there. And for a game that, again, wants to play really fast, really intense, there's these stop gaps, these points where you just kind of stop, and you have to really think, what do I want to unlock? What do I want to do? How do I want to use my powers on there? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It's hard to say. The area where it falls apart a little bit, and this is, I hesitate a little bit to say fall apart because this is entirely subjective on there. You level up very fast. A mission, the picture we're looking at here is I have to explore these 4 tiles, and I have to find 2 of the artifacts and make it to the exit point on the dungeon. So it's kind of like a treasure hunt on there. This is in the core book. I really enjoy playing this mission on there. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to go from like level 1 newbie, and by the time I hit the 4th tile, I'll be well into the mid or end skill trees on there. The game levels you up very fast. In addition to magic items, all those cards in the upper right of the picture there, splash screen on this podcast, those are magic item cards. So at level 1, I'm drawing cards. At level 2, I'm drawing cards. The game drops magical loot everywhere. If you've ever played Diablo, Massive Darkness is Diablo on steroids. And it drops item sets that interact. I mean, you level up way too fast in the game. What it's trying to do, and this I like, what it's trying to do is give you a dungeon crawler RPG experience in a single session, in a single sit down. This is not 4, 5, or 6 campaigns where we started at level 1 and we level up and we get together each week. There's a lot of games that do that. There's a lot of games that play this. This is just a pop miniature game where you're going to hack through and roll some dice and activate some stuff at godlike status at the end, all within an hour and a half to 2 hours playing on there. Is that good or is that bad? My ultimate take on the game, it hits the table for a while and then it goes off the table for a while. I do find myself bringing it regularly to the gaming club because it has the appeal of a dungeon crawler RPG, a lot of miniatures in there, a lot of different character classes, a lot of different loot. Where I do think it works incredibly for casual play is ironically the leveling up system, because you're going to level up so fast and get so powerful in there. It really satisfies that RPG type itch, that role-playing type game in that moment where I'm playing with random people. We're going to have some fun. We're going to roll some dice for 2 hours. We're never going to really play again, or we're going to move on to the next game on there. We're not going to invest tons and tons of time into playing the same game every week. This is not Kingdom Death Monster on there. This is a light dice chucker with how it works. So if that's the case, let's become godlike. Let's go crazy with magic items. Let's hack through bosses and minions and lieutenants and agents that are just really, really powerful like nothing, and will be there like in an hour. So if that's the perspective, I think if you're looking for a casual type dungeon crawler, dice-based, but with some thinking, because you have to figure out how you want to utilize your skills and use your unlocks and use the BAMs and use the dice and use the magic items. But you're not looking for campaign play. You're not looking for anything super, super deep on there. I mean, there is a story. There is leveling up. The missions do follow each other. But likewise, it is a dungeon delve. You can just kind of pull one of the missions randomly and play it. If you're looking for that, the game works really, really, really well. If you're looking for a board game that's like, hey, we're going to play this every week or every other week for a couple of weeks, and we're going to level up and we're going to take ownership over our character, it doesn't want to play that way. It really doesn't want to play that way. So I find it very, very polarizing in how it plays. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Really depends on what you're looking for.